Congratulations on
you.
a 6-3, 6-4 win over Alina Svitolina.
Rock Creek Park does not sound like this. Not for a Friday night quarterfinal. Not for an unseeded qualifier ranked 28th in the world. But the second the ball left Alina Svitolina's racket on match point and drifted straight into the net, a wobble fault from a 2018 WTA Finals champion, the noise that came back was not polite Washington applause. It was a Filipino roar inside an American capital for a 21-year-old named Alex Eala, and the crowd was still on its feet before Svitolina had even lifted her head. Does Alex Eala break into the top 20 by the US Open, or does the tour finally figure her out before she gets there? Drop your prediction in the comments. 6 days before that ovation, Eala was still grinding through qualifying at the Mubadala DC Open. 5 weeks before that, she had already beaten this exact opponent on a different continent, on a different surface, by the exact same score, 6-3, 6-4 in Berlin. That earlier result had a quiet asterisk hanging over it in tennis circles. Grass, they said. New surface, they said. Anomaly. Then Svitolina, the number 2 seed, walked onto a hard court in DC and had to prove it. The night before the match, Svitolina had stood in front of WTA cameras and framed the rematch in language that sounded neutral but landed differently. Tomorrow is a new surface, a new country, a new city, she said. It's a new challenge. Translated out of tour speak, that is the polite version of Berlin was Berlin. It was the veterans' way of putting a boundary around the loss and reserving the right to reset the narrative. She was not wrong to think that way. Svitolina is the reigning Italian Open champion. She is a 5-time Grand Slam semifinalist. She had every reason to believe that on a faster surface, in a country where the number 10 seeding line meant something, the physics of the matchup would tilt back her way. And on paper, the seeding gap agreed with her. The number 2 seed against a qualifier ranked 28. The problem is that Alex Eala had already read the entire script, and she had come to Washington to burn Svitolina's version of it. Start with the number that quietly ended the argument. Eala won 24 return points to Svitolina's 13. Against a top 10 baseliner whose entire game is built on rhythm from the back of the court, that gap is not an inconvenience. It is a structural collapse. Eala did not out-hit Svitolina. She out-read her. Prospects hit big. Champions read the game. Then came the pressure moment nobody talks about because the fireworks came later. Game 8 of the first set. Svitolina, sensing daylight, generated 3 break points to level the match. Eala answered with 5 consecutive points to hold. Not a wobble, not a rally, into a scramble. 5 straight points at the highest leverage moment of the opening set from a woman the world was still calling an underdog. Now put yourself inside Svitolina's second set. You are the higher seed. You are the veteran. You have finally clawed a break and you lead 3 games to 1. This is the part of the movie where experience wins. Instead, Eala won 3 consecutive games and 9 of the last 12 points of the match. The player wearing the underdog label was actually the closer. The 2-time major semifinalist was the one who wilted. That is not a fluke. That is the pattern the people who have been watching Eala have been trying to tell the mainstream tennis conversation for months. First Miami last year, then Berlin, then Wimbledon, then Washington. The trajectory is not a series of upsets. It is a resume being written in real time, and the fans who saw it before the analysts finally have the receipts to hand back. Then came the last point. Match point in Washington. Svitolina serving to stay alive. The point before it, Eala's forehand had clipped the line, in WTA.com's own words, by a fraction of a millimeter, the kind of margin that separates a hot streak from a champion's timing. Match point number 3 arrives. Svitolina tosses, second serve, net, double fault, submission. And the receipt that puts everything above into historical perspective sits on WTA's own account written by the tour itself. 6 top 10 wins in 2026, the most by any player on the WTA tour this season. Not Sabalenka, not Goff, not Rybakina, not Paolini. A 21-year-old ranked 28th in the world has more top 10 scalps in 2026 than anyone in tennis. If you want to know what this really means, you do not need a pundit. You need the person who has been advising Eala from Mallorca since she was 13 years old, a man who has won 22 Grand Slam singles titles, who owns 14 French Open trophies, who has spent his adult life defining what big match player actually means in tennis. According to Eala's former coach Joan Bosch, speaking to Yahoo Sports earlier this year, Rafael Nadal did not hesitate to start advising Alexandra Eala. Nadal does not lend his name casually. Nadal does not pick up the phone for prospects. He picks it up for players he believes are going to matter. His uncle Tony, the coach who built that 14-time Roland Garros machine from the ground up, has personally worked with her at the academy and has said publicly that she has the temperament and the shot-making of a future top 10 player. When the family that built the greatest clay court player in history looks at a 21-year-old from the Philippines and calls her that, the ovation in Washington was not premature, it was overdue. The WTA's own front office understands what it has. Berlin's win over Svitolina was branded on tour social channels as the Eala Express. Washington's ovation was not organic surprise. It was the tour recognizing a headline act arriving in real time. Southeast Asia has never had a WTA Tour star operating at this level, in this form, in this window of a season. That is not a marketing line. That is a market being built from zero, with a live product on the court right now, and the calendar is about to make it louder. Saturday, August 1st, the same day this ovation footage is racing across the internet, Eala plays Naomi Osaka in the DC Open semifinal, first career meeting. Former world number 1 versus the tour's most productive top 10 killer of 2026. It is being billed as the most anticipated all-Asian women's semifinal of the modern WTA era, and it will not be the last stakes moment of the month. The U.S. Open begins in late August, and any seed unlucky enough to draw her is going to spend a week explaining why she is not just a name in the bracket. Live at number 28 and climbing, Alex Eala is going to walk into Flushing Meadows as someone the entire tour is now scouting like a top 15 threat. Because on the evidence in front of us, that is what she already is. 25 days before Washington, this same player walked off Wimbledon court number 1 after losing to Jasmine Paolini in 3 sets in the round of 16. 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. There was no social media meltdown. There was no coaching change. There was no interview where she blamed the moment. On her mindset, heading into DC, Eala said it plainly to Filipino press after the Svitolina win. It's nothing to change my whole game over. I believe that I can do just as well on clay as I can on hard. She flew back to Mallorca, she practiced, she entered qualifying in Washington, she won 2 matches to get into the main draw. She survived a 3-set comeback against Cristina Busa in the round of 16. Then she beat the number 2 seed. That is the response. Not words, reps. Rewind the tape. A double fault on match point from a 2018 WTA Finals champion. The new surface, new challenge line, dismantled by an identical scoreline. 6 top 10 wins in 2026, the most on tour, period. And Naomi Osaka waiting on the other side of the net on Saturday. Alex Eala is no longer a promising Filipino prospect. She is the WTA Tour's most productive top 10 killer of 2026, and Washington is where the tennis world officially had to sit down and admit it. The Filipino fans who were shouting her name back when she was ranked in the 60s were not being loyal. They were being early. The rest of the sport is now doing the catching up. So here is the challenge. Does Alex Eala break into the top 20 by the US Open, or does the tour finally figure her out before she gets there? Drop your prediction in the comments, name the round you think she reaches at Flushing Meadows, and put your marker down before Saturday's semifinal changes the math. Subscribe and stake your claim now. When the Osaka result drops and Flushing Meadows draws its bracket, you want your prediction time-stamped, not written after the fact. The people who called Miami last year already know how this works. The comment section is where the record gets set.